In studio with our co-host, New York Times best-selling author John Gilstrap.
Good morning.
Former member of the House of Delegates, Deputy Revenue Secretary John Doyle.
Good morning, everybody.
Now, I play this tune on the way back in not as a mistake, but as a point. Because this is the Cars moving in stereo, and if you ever saw the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High, frankly, if you're of a certain age, it was required viewing. You know the scene where this song is playing. It's when Phoebe Cates comes out of the swimming pool in the back of Jennifer Jason Leigh's yard there, the back of the house at the swimming pool. Phoebe Cates comes out of the swimming pool, and if you saw the movie, you know what happens next. Phoebe Cates, the actress in that movie there, and married to Kevin Kline, by the way, in case you didn't know that. Did you know that, John?
I don't even
know who Phoebe Cates is?
I didn't see the movie.
Yeah. Well, anyway, getting back to what our point of the matter is right now, Mr. Gilstrap has opened up a new lane of guests to us over the last couple of years, and that is authors of accomplishment. And another one of those has agreed to join us in studio today, making the drive up from Alexandria. Mr. Gilstrap, will you do the honors for us?
Certainly. I'm thrilled to have Tom Young joining us here in studio. He made the 2-hour drive from Alexandria. Most of my writer buddies call in because they're lazy, but we're
or not within driving distance.
We're glad to have him in here. He has a connection. You spent most of your career with the Air National Guard at the 167th here in Martinsburg, right?
That's correct. Good morning, John. Good to see you all. Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you today. Yes, I spent 20 years in the Air National Guard, and although I started in the Maryland Air Guard, in 1998, I transferred to the West Virginia Guard, the 167th Airlift Wing here in Martinsburg, and just loved flying with the 167th. That is a fantastic unit, great people in it. Thoroughly enjoyed my time with the 167th.
Now, they fly the big cargo planes. So when we see them taking off, are they going perhaps overseas? And refueling over the ocean and then keep going to some place? Is that a...
Some of the time we fly local training missions. So when you see an aircraft take off, it could be taking off on a 2-hour training mission to go do touch and go somewhere, or it could be on the way halfway across the world. It just depends.
Now, Tom, you were here when they had the C-5, is that right? Or were you here when they transitioned from the C-5 to the C-17?
Actually, when I first transferred into the unit in '98, they were still flying the C-130.
Okay, yeah.
And then in 2005, 2006, we began converting to the C-5 Galaxy. And
right.
Around the time that I retired from the Guard, 2013, is when they began converting to the C-17.
Because I know each of those three planes has a slightly different mission, or maybe a much of a different mission. And I noticed that it's interesting when we had the C-5s. Those planes make a lot more noise than the 17, but they weren't flying in and out as often. So it was less frequently that you heard the noise. So it's I do know that they were hoping, or at least in Charleston, they were hoping when we lost the C-5 that they would get the C-5H, the newer version. They didn't. We got the C-17, so the mission is different, the plane is different. I've talked to a couple of pilots who had been with them for a while, just didn't want to learn a new airplane, so they retired. Yeah.
It's funny. Before I moved, I lived in Fairfax, and we were under the flight path for Dulles Airport, so saw airplanes all the time. Out here, we never see airplanes, and we were in the process of building the house, and I heard this huge, and it was one of the C-17s. I could wave to the pilot. It was like, oh my God, how often does this happen? And it happens rarely. But you're not here to talk about this. You're actually here to talk about your new book, which is number what?
It's novel number 9.
And it's called The Map Maker.
The Map Maker. Of my 9 novels, it is the third one that is set in World War II. And this particular novel is set within the French Resistance.
So tell us about it.
Well, I have 2 main fictional characters in The Map Maker. One is a French-American woman who is serving with the Resistance. The character's name is Charlotte Deneau. She was an art student, and she has turned her talents to drawing maps and charts and diagrams and so forth on German positions to provide targeting information to the French resistance and to the Allies. The problem is she's a little too good at her job, and the Gestapo knows about her. So she is on the run across occupied France. She still has some important information she has not yet gotten out to the Allies, and she really needs a ride. She needs a flight out of occupied France. It's the job of my other main character, a French pilot named Philippe Girard, to give her that ride. He's a pilot who was with the French Air Force. He got out of France after the fall of France and made his way to Britain and is serving with the British Royal Air Force. A lot of pilots in occupied countries actually did that. And he flies with a what the RAF calls a special duties squadron. Nowadays we call it special operations. And his job is to fly a light single-engine aircraft, a Westland Lysander, into occupied France by night, navigating by moonlight, to try to find Charlotte and bring her out. But that's harder than it sounds because she's on the run and she can't stay in one place for very long. And even if he finds out where she is that good information? Does he trust it, or is it a Nazi trap? So that's the setup of the novel, The Mapmaker.
Well, let me say, Tom writes, his books are all kind of a military theme, or have a military undercurrent, but you have a really good talent for not doing the deep dive into the technical stuff. You make it, everything seems very human, very real, and very exciting. And I have not yet read The Mapmaker. I've read some of your other stuff, and you have a really good talent for bringing stuff alive. I want to talk a little bit about your research into the French resistance. My wife and I went to Paris and to Normandy last year, and our guide was very cynical about the resistance. He said nobody knew who was in the resistance while it was happening, and then after the war, everybody was in the resistance. So, what was your research into the French resistance, and what was their involvement, their true involvement, from what you can tell, into the run-up to D-Day?
I did a lot of reading about the resistance, and in terms of researching technical details, I found a lot of good information on YouTube, of all places, because a lot of World War II training films have been uploaded to YouTube. I don't have a handle on what percentage of the French population participated in the resistance, and that depends a lot on how you define participation. I mean, it could be passive stuff like not cooperating with the Germans, or it could be very active stuff as well. But there's enough out there that you can find information on people who did some important work, and there's some surprising familiar names who participated in the resistance when they were young. I had no idea that the mime Marcel Marceau had participated in the resistance. He was very young at the time. I think he was 16 or 17.
He was a silent protester, I guess.
Yeah, silent protester. He helped...
had a hard time getting out of the box.
Right, there you go. But he helped smuggle young Jewish kids out of France. Mm-hmm. The former French Prime Minister Francois Mitterrand, he also participated in the resistance. Fascinating history.
And that's interesting that you bring up those two names, Tom, because, and I think that's also true in our country with entertainers of a certain age. If you were during World War II, you participated in some manner, one way or the other. And if you were born after that, I was born in '63. And you go back and you look at some actors, actresses, people, French, English, doesn't matter. Their roles in World War II oftentimes were front lines, soldiers, pilots, and whatever, and you have no idea about that, or you're looking at someone who's an entertainer, what they did younger in life. So from a certain era, birth year, that's probably not all that uncommon, is it?
No, not at all. A lot of famous people participated in World War II. The first name that comes to mind is the baseball player Ted Williams. Yeah. He served in World War II, and then he was recalled to active duty in the Marine Corps for the Korean War.
He flew fighter pilots.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, with John Glenn.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Yes.
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. Not only was he a bomber pilot in World War II, if memory serves, he became a squadron commander. Mm-hmm. I remember my grandfather talking about Clark Gable serving in the 8th Air Force. So many famous names of a certain era.
Even Ed McMahon
was
a Marine Corps pilot.
Yes.
And
Lee Marvin was a Marine?
Marine Corps. Lee Marvin was a
yes.
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, so Charlotte Your character, Charlotte Deneau, is that how you pronounce her name?
Correct.
Okay. She has to make her way through France with the Gestapo chasing her. What was the research for tradecraft to stay away from bad guys is different then than it is now?
Some of that I got from reading books, some of it from films on YouTube, some of it was training films, some of it was old documentaries. I found a fascinating film on YouTube about the special duty squadrons, like the one my character Philippe flies in, and just the trade craft they had to use was absolutely incredible. Sometimes under their flight suits, they would wear the clothing of a French peasant. And before they took off on a mission, there were women whose job was to go through everything in their bag, everything in their clothing, to remove anything that could connect them to England. You know, if they were wearing a shirt, well, there better not be a Savile Row tag on that shirt. If they were carrying anything to eat or drink, well, it's not going to be a bag of Earl Grey tea. They went to that length to cover the fact that they were supported by the British RAF.
Yeah, we were talking a minute ago about maybe what were some of the things that the resistance did. It occurs to me, I think one of them was they paid very close attention whenever there was a downed Allied pilot to try and find that pilot and get the pilot out.
They did. They did a lot of recovery and support for downed pilots, and there are fascinating stories about how the pilots had to be so careful to authenticate themselves, because the French resistance had to be careful about infiltration. And if they even suspected that you were not really a downed pilot, that you were a German infiltrator, they just shoot you.
Right.
And there are fascinating stories about that as well. And then one thing I learned in the research is that in terms of the harassment they did with German forces, it wasn't just hit any target whenever you could, wherever you could. Mainly what they were doing was preparing to trip up the German forces once D-Day started, to impede their progress. It was all very coordinated with the British Special Operations Executive and the American Office of Strategic Services. So they weren't just going out and popping any German they could find.
Okay. So tell us about the Map Maker, the origin of the title.
It is my only working title that has survived to publication.
You're on a roll.
Exactly. I don't know about you, John, but I can't start working on a manuscript without a working title. I have to have a title. And I knew that I wanted my main character to be involved somehow in gathering, targeting information for the resistance. And the Map Maker was the first thing that came to mind. And much to my surprise, it became the published title of the novel.
There you go. Actually, right now I'm working on Irene #2. Is the working title for the book. So the working titles don't matter all that much to me. So was the resistance organized in the sense, was there a command structure?
There was a command structure, but it was fragmented. You had different cells that were not aware of each other, and that was by design. There were attempts to have something of a top-down command structure. Nominally, at least, Charles de Gaulle was the head of it. He was in Britain at the time. There was a resistance, a high-ranking resistance officer, Jean Moulin, who was in France, and for a time it was his job to try to coordinate the various cells. Sadly, he was caught by the Gestapo. So they had to be very careful about how much coordination and intercommunication they did.
Also, there wasn't a lot, as I understand it, again from this tour guide who was very cynical, there wasn't a lot of trust from Schaeff, the commanding the Allies, a lot of trust in the information they got from the resistance. There was resistance to using the resistance. Is that what you found out in your research?
I think it depended on what element of the Allied forces you're talking about. I think the OSS did have a lot of faith in the resistance, and the OSS relied on people like Virginia Hall to coordinate with the resistance. So I think maybe it's safe to say that the spooks had more faith in the resistance than did the conventional forces.
Author Tom Young, our guest here on the program. The Mapmaker is the new book that is out. So my next door neighbor was born in England. Obviously his father was born in England, and there is a generational hatred of the French by the English, and I assume vice versa. And it goes back probably 1,000 years. But for these folks, it has to do with how easily the French gave up in World War II, leaving England pretty much on their own to fight the Germans until the Americans joined in 1941. Do members of the French resistance escape some of that resentment by the English?
I don't have any direct knowledge of that, but I would think they would have to, because they did what they did at tremendous personal risk. And if the Gestapo caught them, they could expect worse than just being killed. In fact, one of the things I learned in my research is the way resistance agents were trained. They were told, if the Gestapo catches you, try not to talk for 24 hours. And that will give anybody working with you time to go to ground, time to get away. But there was an acknowledgement that there was going to be, that people were going to be tortured for information. And they didn't even ask them, don't give up anything. They just said, try to hold out for 24 hours. There was at least one agent who was caught by the Gestapo, and during his interrogation, committed suicide by jumping out a window. That's how he avoided giving up information.
When I was, again, as part of this tour, our tour guide said that World War II is glossed over in French schools. They talk a lot about World War I, and World War II is like a chapter, and you move on because it's a source of great national shame for them, which had not occurred to me before.
Yeah, I can assure you it's not forgotten by the English who are still alive from that era either.
And the French have not forgotten what we did for them either. Just back in May, I toured World War II sites in France and in other countries. And driving around Germany, there were American flags flying. Not everywhere.
That's interesting.
Did I say driving around Germany? Driving around Normandy. There were American flags flying in various historic sites.
John was at Normandy this past year, one of the more moving experiences of your life.
Oh, yeah, going to the beaches, where it was more emotional than I thought it was going to be, actually. It's just such an overwhelming force, and defended by actually very few Germans were defending that beach, but it was so well defended and so well targeted out. The loss of life was amazing. And the bravery of the soldiers, the first waves were completely wiped out, and then it was really waiting for the Germans to run out of ammunition, and that's a hard way to get success.
If I could point out, and I was in England 50 years ago or something like that. Is I know what you're talking about their attitude about the French. I think it's important for all of us to remember, and I don't think there are going to be very many historians who dispute me on this. The reason for the French defeat was their military had become politicized. All of the generals in the French army at the time had been appointed because they were selected by politicians who were in power. The real warriors had not risen to the top, and this happens a lot. And they found themselves, it was total incompetence. There was one French army that was surrounded by a German force half its size. But having been surrounded, they really could do absolutely nothing. That was, I think it is critically important for our country and every country in the West right now to understand that we cannot politicize the military.
Good point. Tom, 2 minutes left.
To your point about the French and their defeat, one of the books I read as research for this novel was a nonfiction book. It was a memoir, Flight to Arras, by the French author and aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. and he's talking about flying photo recon missions during the Battle of France, which became the Fall of France. And I remember he complains bitterly in that book that, you know, we go up at great risk, we get shot down, we take these photo recon photos to provide intel to the command staff, and the command staff doesn't believe it. They think, oh, those Panzers can't be where you said they were. Well, yes, they were.
Yeah, they were.
So pitch the book.
Oh, The Map Maker. It will be released on July 22nd. It is available for pre-order now. The Map Maker, a novel of World War II. And by the way, it's not part of a series. It's a standalone, so you don't have to have read any of my previous books to read The Map Maker. And
You can get it on Amazon.
Amazon, any place they sell books.
All right, and folks, pre-orders are important. You don't wait until it's out necessarily. Pre-orders are important for the author, and also you get it on the day of the release. That's
Exactly. Thank you very much.
you bet. And
and
he's really good.
Is there a Tom Young inside the Map Maker?
Not really. I would not dare compare myself with people who were courageous enough to fly into occupied France in a single-engine aircraft armed with nothing but a pistol.
Nevertheless, you served your country. Nevertheless,
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you're doing, and appreciate you making the drive up from Alexandria today
Glad to
too.
be here. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, be sure to be safe on the way back home.
Thank you.